Okay, class. Today we have Lisa DiNoto Glassner with us, and she's going to share some of her story about her Disney fandom, how she moved to the Orlando area, and a few things that she's doing now with her website and with her different entrepreneurial endeavors. So, without further ado, I will turn it over to Lisa. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be with you virtually today. And yeah, I think we all kind of come to our Disney fandom from different directions. For me, growing up, I was an only child, and my parents and I, starting when I was about 4 years old, would start making trips down to Disney pretty much every year. I don't know that I was like a hardcore Disney person at the time. Like, I think for me, it was more just the fact that those family trips were such special times for me growing up. They were, like so many of us, it was sort of the time of the year when we were completely focused on each other. Obviously, they were a lot of fun, and I didn't live for those trips, but I certainly looked back on them fondly as I was getting older. And then as I was going into college and to law school, and even when I was first starting my family, there was a period of time when I really wasn't going to the parks very much. And again, still held that like special place in my heart for Disney. I still enjoyed the times when we would briefly visit, but I wasn't going as regularly during that time. And I had, I'd gotten married. I had my first son, and a couple of years later, I had my second son. I now have two boys. They're 9 and 7 right now. And unfortunately, very shortly after my younger son was born, when he was about 4 months old, not to bring the room down, but my dad was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. And we went through about 10 months of really, really difficult times with him. I mean, it was really just living a nightmare. It was very, very close with my dad growing up. Again, I'm an only child, so my mom was really looking to me for support. I didn't have any siblings to kind of share that load with. And in trying to get through all of that, it was just this really difficult time in my life. I was in corporate law at the time. I didn't mention, but I went to Columbia University undergrad and Harvard Law, and then after that went on to Wall Street, where I was doing a pretty hardcore corporate practice. And then I'd moved down to DC and was doing a similar practice down there. So there was this like year-long period that was just very, very tumultuous for me. I was kind of dealing with it in whatever way I could to kind of get my parents and my mother and get my dad through it and kind of carry my kids through it, as best that I could. And about 10 months after my dad's diagnosis, sadly, we did lose him. And it's a story that I've openly told before. I think I allowed myself some time to process it before I started to share it socially, like I do today. I have a blog and Instagram, and I'm pretty open about my journey at this point. But in any event, after we lost my dad, there's of course all the kind of red tape and paperwork and all the sort of icky stuff that comes along with that sort of an event that I was trying to get my mom through. And about 6 months after that time, my mom and I just decided that we needed to kind of get the heck out of Dodge, and just, get out of our headspace, get out of day-to-day life, and just kind of go somewhere that we could just be happy and kind of let go of everything that we've been going through for a while. And of course, the obvious answer was Disney. And so we planned this trip to Disney about 6 months after we lost my dad back in 2014. 2014, it was October of 2014. And I came down, it was my first trip with my family to Disney, like with my whole family. So it was my boys, my husband, myself, and my mother. And I remember very clearly everything about that trip. We were staying at Boardwalk, which is now my Heart Resort. We actually own a lot of DVC there at this point. But I just remember this point when we were down there that October and just standing on the boardwalk and like breathing in the air and standing on Crescent Lake and just like the smells of the Boardwalk Bakery and the street performers that were on Boardwalk. And I just remember like having this moment where I breathed in and it just felt like home. And it wasn't about riding Space Mountain or eating Mickey pretzels or doing any of the sort of kitschy things that you think about when you're planning a first trip to Disney. It was really just sort of the people and the air and the vibe that was surrounding me in that moment. And it just like something just clicked in my head during that trip. And obviously, like just having been through what we had just been through, Disney was an escape that we all needed, but also, you know, I had all these wonderful memories of spending time with my dad there, and we just recently lost him. So it was just like, for so many reasons, something just clicked into place during that particular trip. And it just felt right. And from that moment on, I think we were visiting really frequently, whether it was just to run down for a weekend or to do a larger family trip. We were just spending a lot of time down here. And I was also, like I had mentioned, in this very demanding job at the time, doing mergers and acquisitions in corporate law. I had been on Wall Street, and I was practicing outside DC. And so it was also becoming an escape from that, because that career path hadn't really been fulfilling me, and I had known that for a long time. So it was also an escape from that at the time. And the other piece of this that I haven't mentioned yet is that I've always been really into health and fitness and ways to take care of myself and sort of optimize how well I function in different scenarios. But all of my sort of tips and tricks for how to function in tough situations stopped serving me when my dad got sick. It just was too extreme a situation to meditate with, or, you know, eat Whole30 or drink my water, or like all the little like tips and tricks that I had learned for how best to survive in difficult situations were no longer serving me in the extreme situation of, you know, mothering my children, working this intense job, taking care of my mom, and dealing with my dad's illness. And so during that time, I started running. I just started distance running. I had never really been a big runner, to say the least, before. Like, I hated the mile in gym class growing up. I would do like a quick cardio run sometimes just to warm up before a weight workout or something, but like I was not a runner at all. But suddenly I sort of stumbled into running as this sort of new form of almost meditation, to get myself out of my own headspace when I was dealing with this very difficult time. And then when I lost my father, I kept running, and it started serving me in new ways and sort of finding me headspace in new ways and processing things in my life, like the fact that maybe I wasn't happy in my career at the time, or, you know, things like that. And at some point along the way, I remember finding out that on February 21st, 2016, Disney was having this thing called the Princess Half Marathon, you know, where you get to run through the parks. And I, at this point, had never heard of Run Disney. Like I said, I had never been a runner growing up. Like, I had sort of just recently reconnected with Disney at all. But when I found out that this race was scheduled for February 21st, 2016, which was the 2-year anniversary of losing my dad, I was like, heck yeah, like this is going to be my like rally call to the universe. Like, I'm still kicking, I'm still strong. Like, it gave me purpose to train for it. You know, these days I run a half marathon like nothing, but back then it was a very big undertaking for me to do 13.1 miles. And so this period of time commenced where I was training for this run, and it was super symbolic to me. It was obviously in honor of my father. It was on the anniversary of losing him. My work schedule at that time had been horrific. Like, I was filling these 400-hour months around the clock. I remember like my younger son's birthday, we were staying at one of those enclosed like water park things, was Great Wolf Lodge. And I remember like my husband was taking my kids to do activities, and I was literally like holed up in the hotel room with a printer closing a deal the whole time. It was a really tough time. But I kind of got through it in large part because I was training for this half marathon that was so symbolic to me. And so February came, we went down, I ran this half marathon. It was super empowering. It was all the things that I dreamt that it would be. And then I came home, and I don't know, I've talked about this, you know, before so much. And I think it's not the most rare thing in the world to achieve something big and have it be so wonderful, and then it's over and you kind of almost crash a little bit because it's like, what next? You know, I did this big thing, and it was wonderful, and in the moment it was wonderful, but like you just kind of return to your same life, and you kind of need to know what that next big thing is. And so after that race, like I said, I was still obviously distance running. I was getting a lot of sort of mental clarity in different ways from the running. And so we got home from that trip, and I remember getting on the telephone with one of my best friends at the time, who's a great, brilliant girl. I went to law school with her, and she had already gotten out of law. And I remember getting on the phone with her and just saying, you know, we're getting me out. Like we've got to get me out. I can't do this anymore. I'm completely burnt out. You know, that I kind of was feeling like the more I was spending time in this space, the more entrenched in it I was getting, because the more sort of niche specific my expertise was becoming. You know, I wasn't getting any younger. I'm not older, but you know, you start to feel a little entrenched in your career, and it gets harder and harder to get out. And I remember having this conversation with her, and you know, this is a line that I quote so often, but she said back to me, she was just like, no, you're not just getting out. Like, you're not just jumping out of it. Like, you might hate your job with all your heart, but it's this huge part of your identity. And it's not just about financially preparing to get you out of this job that you've been using to support your family for so long, but like, it's about mentally processing separating from law. And you know, she was like, just put a date on the calendar. I don't care if it's 6 days from now, 6 weeks from now, 6 years from now, like just pick a date, put it on your calendar for when you're going to finally walk away. And then don't just spend the time between now and then financially preparing for what's coming, but also just spend that time sort of emotionally and psychologically preparing for separating from something that, as much as you might not like it, is just a huge part of your identity. And so that's exactly what I did. I ended up putting that August of 2016 on my calendar as the day I was going to put a notice of my job, my legal job in DC. And, you know, give or take a week or so, because of, you know, deals that I was working on, I did sit down with the partnership at that time. And I think I argued with them for about 4 hours about walking away. They kept telling me that I was going to be miserable. They asked me to take a sabbatical instead. You know, and that was a long and difficult conversation, but I very much knew where my head was at that point. And I did. I ended up walking away, and I didn't know at that point what I was going to be walking into. My husband had been asking me for such a long time, you know, what my dream was for when I walked away from my job. And very, very early on, I might have said things like, oh, I'd love to be an interior designer, or, you know, a graphic designer, or a photographer, or, you know, like all those sort of daydream jobs that, you know, indulge your hobbies. But I was really far from that mentality at that point. Like, some people function really well by daydreaming in difficult situations. I don't at all. Like, I need my blinders up. Like, when I know I don't have an out, and I didn't for a long time, I was supporting my family. You know, I really didn't have an out from law for a long time, and like daydreaming had started to feel very unsafe to me at that point in my life. And so I had put my blinders up for such a long time and trained myself not to daydream, that my answer to my husband when he was asking me what I was dreaming of doing one day slowly became like, I just need like a good 6 months to maybe even a year to detox from this mentality of work being a toxic thing, and to sort of reconnect with what fulfills me, and you know, allow myself the organic process of finding what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, I knew that I had a lot of potential beyond. I mean, I had this big on paper job. I made great money, you know, but at the end of the day, like, I really did feel stifled, and like I wasn't doing what I was meant to be doing by any stretch. And so, you know, this is a long answer to your question, but it's like all these different paths sort of converging, right? Like the running and getting through difficult situations in life, and like that leading to further clarity in my career, and then finding Disney and finding Run Disney, through all of these routes and having it come together. And then it all sort of coming together between that first trip down with my family where everything clicks into place, and the Run Disney event, which was the first of my first Run Disney event. And so, yeah, I think like I allowed myself a while to kind of process internally after I left that job, before I started kind of putting it out there for other people to live it along with me, because I felt like I owed it to myself and to other people the time to internally process before I was trying to like pre-package the story that I'm telling right now for other people. But not too long after putting in the notice and finally leaving the job, the gears started to turn, because we were wholly self-employed at that point, to make the move down here.
Okay.
And so, you know, the challenges, you know, we had real life challenges in doing all of that. Like I said, I was an only child. I'd recently lost my dad, and, you know, whether or not I was going to be able to make this move without my mom, for example, was a big challenge. And there were a lot of long conversations with my mother about that, and sort of what my responsibilities, what I felt like my responsibilities to her were. You know, but we did sort of slowly work that out together as a family, and put the house on the market eventually. And we did end up moving down here in August of 2017.
Okay. All right.
So we live very, very close to Disney. We live about 1.2 miles as the crow flies from Cinderella Castle.
Okay.
Obviously, I don't know what the situation is going to be when your students are watching this, but of course, right now the parks are closed, which has been really hard. But when the parks are open, not only can I see and hear the Magic Kingdom fireworks from my bedroom at night, I can literally hear the water pageant, you know, from Bay Lake in my bedroom. So we're super, super close.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, and that process has, you know, has obviously been underway since then. I have a blog called thecastlerun.com, where I share, you know, from a Disney perspective, and a lot of my readers are just Disney people, who love like the pictures and the news and all that good stuff. But I share it very much from the perspective of the background that I just shared with you guys. And so while a lot of my readership is, you know, hardcore Disney fans who love to follow along, you know, with our, you know, now local to Disney lives, there's also a large base of my readership that may or may not already be Disney people. They'll probably end up being Disney people when they finish, you know, spending some time on my blog. But at the same time, I think that in so openly sharing this story, I can inspire others to take the reins on what fulfills them. So your dream might not be moving to Disney. Your dream might be having a farm in the Midwest, or moving to Tahiti, or surfing in Hawaii. But if you can find a way to find like the overlap in that Venn diagram between like what you love and what your skill set is and how you can serve your community, like there's a job in there somewhere, or not a job, but a career path.
Yeah. Thank you. So one thing about this class is we obviously use Disney. We talk about Disney a lot. The kind of the overriding theme throughout the semester is being a fan of something, being interested in something, and how that influences every other aspect of what you do. Your personal life, your social life, your professional life. And so it very much is, I appreciate you saying that your dream doesn't have to be living close to Disney. It could be whatever you want it to be. You just, you know, try to make sure you're taking steps to do that and get to that point. And so you said you moved in August 2017, right? So the Castle Run, which if students, you have it on the syllabus, that you can follow along, and you can also follow Lisa and see some of the things that she's putting out. But tell us more about the Castle Run. You kind of said how it came about, but kind of what it is now, and some of the things you're working on now. Like I know this last recently, I think you had a virtual 5K for the Run Disney virtual 5K. So you're building quite a community with that. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So, like I started to allude to before, my blog, which I have a variety of social media presences. I have a large presence on Instagram and Facebook, obviously, and other places. But the heart of what I do and the center of everything that I do is my blog, which is thecastlerun.com. And if you go to that main page on the site, you'll see, 3 boxes for the sort of 3 big areas that I cover. And that's Disney, of course, running, and just life in general. And through my blog, I think my community has grown to be such a strong and integral thing, because I am so honest, and because I always say, like, there are plenty of Disney sites out there that just cover the news, and they're great and they're very worthy, wonderful sites. But that's just not how I choose to do it. Everything that I talk about in my own voice and through my own perspective, very openly. And so if you like me, you're going to love my blog. If you don't like me, you're probably not going to love my blog, and that's okay. You're not going to serve everyone. But you can identify who your community is, and serve them. And in knowing that my community tends to be people who love Disney with all their heart, but also are sort of more multifaceted, might have backstories similar to mine, or dealing with, with things, or, sort of have 360-degree lives, only one aspect of which is this wonderful fandom for Disney. And in honoring that and how I write to people, I have developed a beautiful community like that. And so, like you mentioned, I come at running from a very humble place. Like, I was not a big runner growing up. I wasn't a track star. I'm not crazy fast to this day. I love distance running because it serves me in the ways that I've talked about. And so in coming to running with that humility very openly, I think a lot of people have found inspiration to run or otherwise sort of better themselves from a health and mental perspective, who might otherwise have been intimidated by it. And so, yeah, like, one of the great things that I was able to do recently is organize, a virtual 5K, that sort of synced up with some of the virtual runs that Run Disney is doing, and bring people into the space, during a time, first of all, when the regular race seasons aren't happening because of COVID, and social distancing situations. And so being able to provide a platform for people to sort of come together virtually and run, quote unquote, together, has been a really beautiful way to serve the community and inspire people, especially people who might not have ever been a runner, before they started reading my blog and seeing how running served me. So there's that aspect to what I do, and that aspect to my community. I also have a shop. It's corememorycandles.com, and there's actually a shop link that's just right on my blog page that you would see across the top. And in that shop, what I do is sort of recreate, in a beautiful way, some of the olfactory experiences of Disney. And so whether it's whatever sort of grabs your heartstrings, if you're a fan of Disney, the scents are so tied to that. So whether it's that sort of fresh smell that hits you when you're walking into the Contemporary or Beach or Yacht Club, or on Soarin' over Fiji, or Flight of Passage, I have a scent that is that. I have a house that's sort of Jumbo House at Animal Kingdom Lodge. There's, of course, that beautiful Pirates of the Caribbean scent that we all love so much, that's really hard to place your finger on. And so that's been a huge way for me to serve my community right now, because, not only are there people missing Disney because they live far away and don't have a trip coming up soon, but the parks are closed. And so it's been a beautiful way to both, like, provide for my family and also serve my community really well by putting out this product that allows people to bring the parks home when they can't be there.
And one really great thing about, specifically about the scent, is when you talk about what kind of makes memories of people, or what shapes their memories. Obviously, sight and touch or feel, but music and scents is another thing. The smells that we have, and for people who have been to the parks, yeah, you can't. I can't place what the kind of Disney smell is to me, or what is, kind of brings the best memories to me. But everybody has them, right? And so tapping into that and giving people that they can consume at their homes when they're not at Disney, and sometimes they're thousands of miles away and they're not going to go for long periods of time. It's something that's really, really cool. The With the runs, how did, especially because now students are we are in the new normal, so to speak, with doing things remotely. How did the virtual run work out? Like, how many people did you have, and how did you communicate? Did you communicate along the way or after the fact, or things like that?
Yeah, so just as far as using online tools, between the blog and my Instagram, and then largely on Facebook, just because that's such a great place for gathering. And some of your students might gravitate to other platforms, that age base tends to be on, but kind of find where your community sits.
Mm-hmm.
And my community happens to sit very happily on Facebook, with a large crossover on Instagram. And I, created the event. I created an event page. So I have a business page for the Castle Run on Facebook, and then used that to create an event for this virtual run that was set for a certain day, and then share that out both on my personal profile and in my Facebook group, and in my Instagram, allow, to sort of let people know that it was happening. And then use that event sort of as a gathering space, encouraging people. And you kind of just have to think about ways to help people feel close together, even if you're not literally running together. And so the Run Disney virtual run that we were sort of running in honor of was, the theme was the Mad Hatter teacups. Mm-hmm. And so I created a shirt on TeePublic that people could get if they wanted to, just kind of all be wearing the same thing, and a race bib that, people could wear when they were running. And then just encourage people to come together on that day, whether it be at 6 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock at night, and share out kind of what, where they were running, and take pictures of your run and who were you running with, and like, give me a little backstory. Like, was this, was this just sort of another run of the mill run for you, or was that 5K a really, really big deal? I mean, just for some people, going outside and walking 3 miles is really, really challenging. And so I want to honor that just as much, if not more, as somebody who's going to go out there and run 6-minute miles, who could do that any day. And so for me, like, championing the people who, are really challenged by, getting out there and moving their bodies at any speed or in any way, is a really, really big deal.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Another thing that the students may come across is, it was last school year, right? At the first day of school, you have a really interesting story about the first day of school. So why don't you tell the students that?
Yeah. So, this is crazy. And it sort of speaks to how close we live to Disney, because for my community, it's, what happened isn't that strange. Yeah. But I think around the world, people were hit by a little bit more. So, everybody kind of has their first year of school pictures, and, some moms are kind of silly about the first day of school. I know there's pictures of ladies, toasting, mimosas in their driveways on the first day of school. And, my kids are my world. My kids are the center of my universe. But I also, like, am a grown-up who appreciates her own time, just like most moms and dads do. And so my kids went off to the first day of school. In Florida, we start school super, super early. So it was August 11th last year, they had their first day of school. And so I took them off to school. I ended up sort of going over to the Contemporary because I had something I had to take care of there. And then I walked across the street to Magic Kingdom, and just to be silly, I got, you know, if you're a Disney fan, you know they have like celebration pins. And so I went into Community Hall and grabbed a celebration pin, and then just sort of was silly and wrote like, I'm celebrating the first day of school, just playfully, because I was there alone. And so I was celebrating the first day of school because mom got to go to Magic Kingdom by herself. And so I took my pin, and my whole intent initially was just to take a picture of this pin, like sort of with the castle in the background for, you know, a cute Instagram post. But as I was walking down, I bumped into some of the citizens of Main Street, and I was like, oh, it'll be cute if they held the pin. So I had Hildegard, some of the people on Main Street, I had take pictures with the pin. And they got such a kick out of it that I was like, oh, I'll do a few more of these. So I walked around, I took a few more pictures. I had like some of the staff taking pictures with the pin. And then I stumbled upon the fairy godmother, who, she actually happened to be a very, very special friend of the fairy godmother. She's been around for, she knew Walt back in the day, and she was one of the original Snow Whites, and now she's fairy godmother. So she saw me, and she just got it right away. And we had this moment, and there's this series of pictures of us with the pin that were just incredibly funny. And so I came home and I popped up an Instagram post. I think it took me 15 minutes and a blog post. And then I headed out again to run some more errands. And within like 45 minutes, I had a message from Good Morning America wanting to cover it. And yeah, it just spiraled out from there. I think Good Morning America initially picked it up, and then, you know, ABC in general picked it up. And then all of a sudden I was like doing interviews with like Fox Business News. We were on Inside Edition. And it was literally an internationally viral story. I mean, people were sending me clips from like Dominican Republic and like Mexican newspapers and Scotland. It's just everywhere. So I think like, and I think like the lesson behind that is, I obviously didn't know it was going to get that big by any stretch of the imagination when I did it, but I also kind of knew what I was doing, in that Florida was one of the first, areas where, one of the first to go back to school. So I was kind of getting in early on it. And I was kind of doing this thing that so many moms do, but just by virtue of where we live, I was able to do it at Magic Kingdom. And so I always kind of say, like, you never know when lightning's going to strike, but you can always hold up the rod. And that was kind of what I was doing that day. So obviously it got much, much bigger than I expected it to. It was insane for a while there. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I think, you learn a lot about sort of how tough you have to be, because there were some people who weren't very kind when the story came out. I think, living this close to Disney, like my kids were literally at Animal Kingdom the day before. They go to Disney anytime they want. We live 5 minutes from the parks. And so I'm not a bad mom for going to Magic Kingdom with my kids. They go anytime that they want. But, there were some people who don't know me and don't know how close I live. And so they were judging me as a mother and all those things. And you kind of have to learn a lot very quickly about, being a big girl on the internet when things like that happen. So it was a crash course, but definitely a lot of fun.
And because you live so close, I have a few more questions about the parks themselves. Because you live so close, how do you just pop in for an afternoon or for lunch or just something quick to any of the parks?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. More often than not, really. We don't really rope drop to close anymore. And that was my daydream. And when I would talk about moving here and the daydream of moving here, my kind of tagline when I started all this was lunch at Epcot. And that was what I used to tell people when I was trying to explain to them why I wanted to live here. Like, I wanted it to be a regular part of my day. My dream wasn't sort of rope dropping Magic Kingdom and riding Space Mountain. My dream in moving down here was like on a Saturday, waking up in the morning, maybe like taking the kids to the dentist, going grocery shopping, and then hitting up Epcot and like having lunch, just as a normal part of our day. And that is our life now. or it was at least when the parks were open.
Yeah.
Hopefully that'll be back soon. But yeah, it's the beauty. It's a different way of experiencing the parks. I think when I initially would come down here and I was working this awful job and things were so stressful, it was like this big momentous emotional thing when we would come down. And a part of me wondered what it would be like to lose that in a way and making it sort of a part of our new normal. But I will say 1,000 times over, like, I will take my current normal over, the excitement of driving through the Disney gates for a vacation any day.
Yeah. And on the parks, and you just mentioned it, the parks, when Lisa's talking to us, the parks are closed right now. There are phased reopenings planned. How do you think that has impacted? It's impacted people around the world that the parks being closed. But how has it impacted people who live in the Orlando area and live close to the parks, that it was part of, their daily routine to just go to the parks, or even drive through the parks or drive through the grounds on their way to work or wherever else? What's the impact then, you think?
I mean, I think that, there's a lot of different answers to that. In part, it does sort of jolt your identity. I remember the day we found out the parks were going to be closing, I was actually recording a podcast episode with my friend Lou Mangello, who I know you've had on the show before. And I remember saying, like, we're not Disney locals for a minute. We're just Central Florida locals.
Yeah.
And really, like, just, I might go sometimes 2 weeks without going to the parks at all, but it's still there. Like, I literally wake up to the train whistle and the ferry horn streaming in through my window, and you see the fireworks at night and the water pageant. And it's just such an ever-present part of your day. And so to have that taken away, in part, I'm kind of looking forward to that magic again when the parks reopen. I mean, I would stroll into Magic Kingdom anytime that I wanted. And so I would hate to say that I took it for granted. But certainly that, like, emotional feeling of turning the corner and seeing Cinderella Castle goes away a little bit. I mean, it's almost like you're going in and trying to experience that through other people's eyes who are visiting. And so I know I'm going to get that emotional moment back again when the parks reopen. So I'm excited about that. But it also just kind of reminds you that this isn't the only reason that we moved down here. The community here is such a beautiful thing. The outdoor life is so great. The neighborhood that we live in, we're all doing it safely with social distancing, but, I'm going out running with my kids most days. And while we're running, we're seeing families out on bikes and rollerblading down the street and fishing in local lakes and just enjoying the sunsets and everything else that Florida has to offer from a quieter perspective. So I do think that while it's been sort of a hit to our identity to not kind of have the fireworks chime 9:00, in my house like they usually do, to kind of take a step back and, reevaluate all the reasons that we lived here, that we moved here, and, looking forward to kind of appreciating those first steps into the park like I used to when I was coming here on vacation when it does reopen.
Okay. So a few just kind of rapid fire questions, since this is a fandom class, and we spend some time talking about, we do debates over the best movies, the best MCU characters, things like that. A few questions about the parks. What is your favorite park at Walt Disney World?
I don't know if the word favorite works, but like Epcot is my heart park.
Okay.
Epcot is my happy place. Absolutely. So hands down, it would have to be Epcot.
What about ride? What would be, if you had one ride that you were going on, what would it be?
So if I was going to get on one ride, I think, and it's actually closing down for refurbishment soon, but Spaceship Earth. I think it's just that one ride that have always gotten on and just kind of had that moment to breathe and be like, all right, I'm here. Like
Yeah.
it's quiet, I'm here, and it's so familiar. Yeah, I think Spaceship Earth would probably be the one.
Okay. And since you mentioned going to lunch at Epcot, um, what is, it doesn't have to be in a park, but on property, what's your favorite place, favorite restaurant?
So that's an impossible question. It's an impossible question. I think
What about
Boma
top three?
yeah, okay, I can try that. Yeah, I think Boma at Animal Kingdom Lodge with a side of Sanaa for after hours bread service is going to be on the slate. We do like we'll see how much it changes because I doubt there's going to be normal buffets there at least
Mhm.
for a while. But it's just such a gorgeous resort, and we actually traditionally will do Boma on Christmas Eve as a family.
Okay.
So that's always a special place for us. So that's up there on my list. Geyser Point at Wilderness Lodge is just the most gorgeous, relaxed setting. The second on that would probably be Nomad Lounge in Animal Kingdom, but I think Geyser Point wins out for setting, and the bison burger there is to die for.
Okay.
So I do love that. And yeah, gosh, I only have one left, huh? I think my last would probably be Homecoming at Disney Springs.
Okay.
There's a lot of great spots at Disney Springs, but I think my kids love Homecoming. We always have such a good time there, and I think the wait staff there is second to none.
Okay. Favorite snack or treat in the parks?
Oh, I think I'm an old school Mickey pretzel and cheese girl.
Okay. All right. And then if what would be your advice for some people who have never been, or maybe have been once or twice? What would be your advice for getting the most out of your visit? Not necessarily seeing the most or riding the most, but kind of getting the best experience someone could have.
Yeah, I mean, I think you almost started to answer your own question. So make it the trip that you want it to be. I think when you start to plan, especially that first Disney trip, it can be extremely overwhelming because there's all the acronyms and all this planning, and oh my goodness, I need to know where I'm going to eat in 6 months and ride what I'm going to ride 60 days out. And just know that like that planning is only as much as you want to do. Like I happen to be extremely type A and love planning, and for me, like that trip planning process almost extended the trip mentally because I got to start thinking about what I was going to do, and it was a lot of fun. So if you're really into planning and you're super type A and you like kind of having that schedule to start off with, then go ahead and dive into that planning process and plan things out. If you don't, know that you can kind of fly by the seat of your pants to some extent. You might want to do a little bit of planning in advance, but you can kind of fly by the seat of your pants and still have a really, really wonderful trip. And then once you get here, I would just say use whatever you have planned as a very light guide, because you're not going to do everything that's on your list. If you happen to be, at Magic Kingdom and you've got a Seven Dwarfs Mine Train Fast Pass for 1 o'clock and it's 12:45 and your kids are crazy happy and they're playing on a playground and or playing the water park and Storybook Circus and they're having a great time, just don't sweat it. Don't focus on what you're not, like anything in life, right? But Disney is so overwhelming that it's this lesson tenfold. Just focus on what you can do and enjoying whatever you happen upon with your family and enjoying those moments over getting to that Ohana reservation that you worked so hard for.
So to end with, is there anything you think would be good for the students to know? And that includes how to get in contact with you. Like I said, we have a running list of information on the syllabi, but feel free to share anything you think the students would find helpful or interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I would just encourage anybody, if there's anybody who this story speaks to, and I know you guys you're young and you might not have gone through the period of not being happy in a job yet or not being whatever, but if you're sitting here today and you're in a major that maybe your parents suggested and didn't feel quite right to you, or something about your path doesn't feel right, like first of all, just know that I was almost 40 and at a Harvard law degree, and I was in big law, and I now live at Disney World and make candles and do social media mostly for a living. It's never too late to make a change,
Mhm.
and you don't owe unhappiness to anyone. There's no like culture of misery that you're going to be bound to for the rest of your life. And it's never too late to make a change. So just know that, like, follow your heart. It's a beautiful time in this world because we're more than ever able to create our own careers and create our own paths. And if somewhere along the way you misstep and you feel like, oops, I should have done X and I did Y instead, and maybe it was the encouraging of someone else when I kind of knew it didn't feel right. Like, it's never too late to take a step back and regroup and redefine what fulfills you and reconnect with what fulfills you. And please, like, I've been there. I know how hard it is. Like I said, I started out kind of going through the Ivy Leagues and all that good stuff. And I kind of did get thrown into that path of success and making my family proud and all that good stuff. And so I've been on that part of the path, which some of you might be on right now. And I've been on this later part of the path where I kind of reconnect and redefine. And so if any of this speaks to you, if any of this raises questions for you, never, ever, ever hesitate to reach out to me. I know you guys have my contact information on your syllabi. And I welcome, I welcome contact from anyone.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for doing this, Lisa. This was amazing. It's great hearing the story.
Thank you.
As I said, our students come from different backgrounds as far as what they're studying, having been to the parks, having not been to the park, some this being the first experience they have with learning more about Disney and the company and everything to do with Disney. So thank you very much for this. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.